Hello, everyone. Welcome. Tonight's episode is called Cultural Revolution to Color Revolution. So I want to introduce you to this concept of a color revolution. Um, First of all, we as we've been talking about, as we all should know, we are in the middle of a cultural revolution right now. Um, it basically kicked off in the summer of 2020, but it was in the works. The groundwork was laid for it decades prior to that. But we are in the middle of a cultural revolution, which is designed to destabilize our country, along lines of race, along lines of sex, along lines of supposed so-called gender, um, and basically do away with everything in the past as being, racist, oppressive, and we need to get rid of all that and start over, right? That's the idea of the color revolution. Of the cultural revolution. Um, Now, and the reason I'm doing this particular episode that I want to talk about these topics, especially the color revolution topic, is to make you aware of what this is, of what a color revolution is, and what potentially, and might even be likely, but certainly potentially could happen over the next year or so, leading up to the election, at the presidential election, and months after, or some period after the presidential election, depending on who wins. And just to touch base on the election real quick, people have to get out of the mindset that this is an election of, let's say, Republicans who have the best in mind for America, versus Democrats who have the good intentions for the best in mind for America, and they just have different ways of maybe approaching that, and you know whatever party wins or whatever, at least they have good intentions for us and for America, right? This is completely different election. This is a completely different kind of moment in history. I talked about it during the my episode Escalation Acceleration, right? In terms of the rhetoric surrounding this election, and how basically both sides believe if the other side wins the election, it's the end of our country. And it's that serious, right? It's that serious. Um, and both sides really, let me put it this way, and this is my opinion. This is how I think. This is how I feel anyway, right? If Biden or whatever Democratic nominee wins the presidential election, this country starts sliding into the CCP, Communist Chinese Party style tyranny. That's the direction that the country is going to head. And a lot of people believe that, right? The other side, right? The Democrats believe that if Donald Trump wins the election, that it's going to slide into an authoritative country, right? Authoritarian dictatorship country, right? So their mindset is to prevent that from happening by any and all means necessary, right? So this is the rhetoric surrounding, this is the emotion surrounding, this is the thoughts surrounding this upcoming election. And and understand too that the main reason why Donald Trump is such a threat is because of he's not part of the establishment, right? This is why Nikki Haley stayed in the race as long as she did, even though her poll numbers were terrible, right? Because she became, once it became apparent that Ron DeSantis wasn't gaining any traction, right? The establishment Republicans, which are basically kind of this uniparty with the establishment Democrats in a large sense in terms of their outlook on the world, they rallied behind Nikki Haley to try to boost her numbers and to keep her in the race. And also potentially if something happened with Donald Trump in terms of on the legal side of things or anything else, right? So it's really and I think a lot of people know this by now, and if you don't, I mean, you need to start looking at it this way. It's really the establishment versus the American people, the populist movement, who want to maintain America, who want to maintain American sovereignty, who do not want to go into this globalist, head down this globalist path led by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and a bunch of these other supranational organizations. So anyway, I'm just trying to set up what's coming in terms of potential unrest and protests and riots and all kinds of things that we saw in the summer of 2020 that might kick off at a much larger scale over the next year or so, depending on what happens with the election. And I want to make you aware of this concept of a color revolution, and generally what it is it's basically a foreign policy of the United States, a way of kind of overthrowing foreign governments without a military intervention type of thing, right? What they do is they end up supporting internal opposition groups financially, advisory, all kinds of ways to support these opposition groups, and to really stir up trouble within the country. And then when the election happens, they try to frame it in terms of the results not being legitimate, and then stirring up this populace that that they've been funding and that they've been advising, and creating this movement to basically overthrow the government, right? So I just want you to be aware, so that if these things start popping off, that you have this concept at least in mind to understand that this is potentially what's happening. Because it's important that we don't get caught up in the moment and believe what the media is telling you, what the government is telling you, because it could very well. Oh, and by the way, right, another thing too is what happened after 2016, when Brexit happened in Europe, when Britain voted to exit the European Union, and when Trump won the presidential election, that really freaked out the establishment. It completely caught them off guard. They expected Hillary to win the presidency and to continue with their plans, but Trump threw it completely off guard. completely off plan. And that's one of the reasons why that's the main reason why from right off the bat, they did everything possible to lie about him and to do everything they can to destroy what he wanted to do for the country and to destroy him personally. Right. And they're still trying to do it. They're still trying to do it. So the point is, I mentioned that this color revolution tactic was kind of directed towards foreign nations in the past. But around, this 2016 events basically had our national security apparatus turned inward on the American people, because they do not want Trump or any populist candidate to regain power. So anyway, so this is what I wanted to try to just kind of review this color revolution concept. What I'm going to bring up on screen real quick here is, and first of all, just another thing too, real quick in the chat here. I'm just going to say hello to everybody. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and fire them away in there. We'll touch base on them. But so let me bring this up. Give me a second here. Okay, so this is just kind of like the Wikipedia entry on a color revolution, and by all means, I know and understand that Wikipedia is not necessarily always the best source for information, but I did read through a little bit of it here, and it's kind of like it's on track of what I want you to kind of like be aware of. And I know it's probably difficult for you to read. I'm going to just read it real quick here so you get a general sense of what it is. So the color revolutions were a series of often so-called nonviolent protests and accompanying attempted or successful changes of government and society that took place in post-Soviet states, particularly Belarus, Georgia, Ukraine, and Kyrgyzstan, and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia during the early 21st century. The aim of the color revolutions was to establish Western-style liberal democracy in those countries and eliminate corruption. So, right, of course, in their mind, right? They were primarily triggered by election results widely viewed as falsified. The color revolutions were marked by the usage of the internet as a method of communication, right? Once the internet became and social media kind of became a thing, right? It became so much easier to organize people to create these protests and these movements. As well, let me see. As well as a strong role of non-governmental organizations in the protest. So this is something that's really important to understand: the role of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in these protests. And a lot of these NGOs are funded, by the government, are directly kind of like connected to the government, and it's a way for the government to do these operations, kind of like and say that they're not involved. And just real quickly, right? The reason that they're called color revolutions because they were given basically names of colors, right? These various revolutions. What do we got here? Georgia was the Rose Revolution. Ukraine's was the Orange Revolution, right? Kyrgyzstan's the Tulip Revolution, right? So that's where the name Color Revolution comes from. So that's a quick kind of like description of that. So what I have kind of planned for the rest of the broadcast here is I'm going to play a series of videos. They're mostly from this guy's name's Mike Benz, and I put his name and his Twitter link in the description. He is a former State Department kind of cybersecurity person from the Trump administration, right? So he's got great insight into how these things work and what's going on now, right? So I'm gonna play a video. We'll start off with one here from Mike. And this is him on the Jesse Kelly show. Let me bring this up quick. So this is Jesse Kelly here, and Mike will come on, and we'll just listen to what he has to say.
Weird. The whole CIA Ukraine story. Have you been studying this at all? New York Times is even talking about this. Long before Putin crossed the border, it looks like the CIA was involved in Ukraine. Really, really involved. How involved? What is this story? Let's talk to Mike about it. Joining me now, Mike.
So, and real quick too, he brings up the CIA. You'll hear Mike talk about this kind of like three-pronged hydra, three-headed hydra of the CIA, the State Department, and the Pentagon, and he will occasionally refer to them to that grouping as the blob, and that's not actually that's not a term that he came up with. Actually, that was a term that someone from within that grouping came up with and called it, right. So he calls it the blob. Occasionally, you'll hear him say that.
Mike Benz, he is the executive director at the Foundation for Freedom Online. Okay, Mike, pretend like I just got here from the moon yesterday. Why is the CIA involved in Ukraine? What's happening here?
The CIA has been involved in Ukraine for a very long time, but most sort of relevant to this story is we overthrew the democratic.
So you're going to hear a lot on Ukraine throughout this, right? But and you're going to not only about color revolution, but also Hunter Biden's involvement in what's going on, and also Randy Weingarten, the president of the Teachers Union, the American Federation of Teachers, her involvement and unions involvement, and how those all those things kind of come together. That has a potential and a likely effect on what's going to happen in our country over the next year or so, right? This is why I'm trying to review this information.
Democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014 to kick off.
Involved in Ukraine? What's happening here?
The CIA has been involved in Ukraine for a very long time, but most sort of relevant to this story is we overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014 to kick off sort of the modern era of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. There was a president in power there in Ukraine named Viktor Yanukovych, who had rejected a trade deal that the IMF had wanted him to sign, which would have effectively forfeited the economic sovereignty of Ukraine to the Euro-Atlantic axis. And he signed a trade deal with Russia at that time. And this was essentially a stab in the back, it was perceived, by the US State Department and the UK Foreign Office and the rest of the Brussels establishment in NATO. And so we activated a rent-a-riot mob, a sort of January 6th style insurrection, if you will, to get the Ukrainian civil society groups that had received $5 billion.
And Mike refers to it as a January 6th style insurrection. He's saying that in terms of if it was an actual insurrection, or if it was an actual coup, right? That's how he's referring to it. He mentioned this kind of rent-a-riot where the blob, or the CIA, kind of funds these organizations to get them active, to get them activated.
Insurrection, if you will, to get the Ukrainian civil society groups that had received $5 billion in State Department, USAID, and CIA cutout money through the National Endowment for Democracy to run that democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, in Ukraine out of office, and to install a new president in Ukraine who would be more pliable to so-called U.S. interests. And I'm not even saying this pejorative. This is just a factual description of what happened. Victoria Nuland, the head of the U.S. Embassy there in Ukraine, even confessed to this $5 billion being pumped in, and she was personally handing out cookies and water bottles during the Maidan Revolution, then was caught on a hot mic with Jeff Pyatt from the State Department as well, handpicking the new installed Ukrainian government.
So, and this here is this is Victoria Nuland here, right? She's kind of the State Department's representative in Ukraine, although she just resigned recently within the past, I think, week or two. But she was heavily involved in Ukraine. This here is Mike just mentioned her kind of handing out food and stuff like that during the color revolution to the coup to overthrow the government in 2014. This is her. This is just a picture of her there. So I just wanted to show you who Victoria Nuland is. All right, let's get back to this.
Yatsenyuk, the new president after 2014, was not elected by the Ukrainian people. He was selected by the U.S. State Department, and that was even, again, caught on hot mic. So whenever the State Department gives $5 billion to a network of NGOs, network of so-called independent media institutions and civil society folks and NGOs set up to form these renta riots, that they don't just give $5 billion and leave. They effectively shepherd that money through CIA intermediaries. The CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department always move as one through the interagency process. There's a much bigger story here around the economics of Ukraine and the European gas market, which runs through this whole story. But essentially, the CIA was instrumental in actually orchestrating the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. And then this new New York Times piece is fascinating with its details, but it sort of starts the story right after the coup. And even then, the details are quite damning, but I can pause there.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to just fast forward a little bit here in the interest of time.
On a macro level, why are we so in love, or I should say involved, with this area, with this region? It's a former Soviet state. They're always fighting each other, killing each other, this territory, that territory, this guy owns this, that guy owns that. And yet I'm listening to you here, and I've been doing a bunch of reading on this for at least a decade. It looks like we've been obsessed with this place. What am I missing?
Well, the movie, a river runs through it. Well, in Ukraine, the energy runs through it. To answer this story fully, requires sort of a long scope over the role of military and energy in geopolitics. But the sort of short version of it is Russia was a colony of the U.S. from 1991 to 1998 during the Yeltsin years. Putin rose to power in sort of the ash heap of the Soviet Empire at a time when its stock market had fallen to something like 5% of what it once was, and having sort of the U.S. London access privatize and sell off almost all of the key assets held by the Soviet government during the communist era. And the only two things that Putin had to rise to prominence again after 1998 were the fact that Gazprom and the Russian gas market were still the largest company in the world, largest company. And that was because the entire Russian economy essentially ran on Russian energy exports to Europe, which runs through Ukraine. It also runs to Germany through the Nord Stream pipelines. But maybe that's a story for another day. But essentially, the Ukraine is the portal into Europe, and Russia's entire economy is based on being able to sell its energy to Europe, or at least it was before 2022. And so if you could get Russia off of the European energy market, if you could kick Russia from Ukraine, then you could bankrupt Russia. And if you bankrupt Russia, you also take them out militarily. Russia opposes the U.S. militarily in almost every region on the face of the globe. I mean, the reason the President Obama did a land invasion of Syria, and he was only repelled because of Russian military backstopping of the Syrian government through the S-400 missile systems and others. Russia also has a robust arms industry. It's sort of their second export other than energy to all over Africa and Latin America, providing arms to groups that are being essentially locked in a destabilization conflict with Pentagon-backed forces. So if you can kill Russian energy, you kill Russian military. And so there's a lot of upside.
Just notice the focus on Russian energy, Ukraine energy, and he's talking about natural gas for the most part, just natural gas and oil, but but just notice the focus from the State Department's from the blob's perspective on the energy component, on the natural gas component.
Sides from the foreign policy perspectives, establishment's perspective, to kill Russian gas and then have that essentially fall to U.S. companies. And this is classic sort of U.S. diplomacy from the 20th century. You have to remember, Russia and that whole Eurasian mantle there is something like 2/3 of the entire world's hydrocarbons. If you kick Russia out, now we control basically everything from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea. Everything from Georgia and Azerbaijan essentially falls into our grasp as well. So if you can kick Russia from Ukraine, you basically win the entire Eurasian continent, as well as unfettered militarism around the world. So there's a million reasons to do it, and the fact that you essentially rob them in the process by stealing $1 trillion worth of energy market proceeds by having U.S. companies like Chevron, Exxon, Halliburton, Shell in London take over the market through LNG of what Russia used to have through Gazprom. All of that, you would say, is, you'd make the argument, is just classic 20th century diplomacy with how we built our middle class by doing this to every other country during the Cold War. But we were not expecting this sort of robust military response from Russia, and it has now sort of put the question to a head in terms of how far the U.S. is willing to go to do its traditional empire building.
Is Russia going to win? I get some mixed reports on this, but obviously a lot of this stuff is going to be resolved by whoever wins this Russia-Ukraine dust-up. What's happening now, Mike?
Well, it's hard to penetrate the fog of war there. I mean, obviously things do not look good right now from the U.S. State Department's perspective. There was, after losing a very significant amount of territory in Ukraine, not the commercial sort of side of Ukraine, which is Western Ukraine and Kiev, but the eastern portion of Ukraine, which has all of the shale. This is a very important point. Burisma's gas rights and Naftogaz's whole, their basically market potential was being able to mine the shale that's east of the Dnieper River there. Well, that is now militarily occupied by Russia. So all of the tens of billions of dollars of deals that were signed by U.S. and London companies to exploit those natural resources are now under the military protection and geographic control of Russia. And that, like a pit bull, does not appear to be loosening anytime soon. I think what the State Department is ultimately going to try to angle to do is to use infusions of another, probably $1 trillion worth of U.S. taxpayer money over the next several years to bring things to an effective standstill and not lose any more territory. I think that's the only hope at this point. And then it basically strikes some sort of peace deal, ceasefire on semi-favorable grounds, and then effectively upscale the CIA's role to be able to, in a cloak and dagger clandestine fashion, walk back on the signed deal that they plan to make to take the country back while Russia isn't looking.
Good grief. Mike, that was friggin' awesome, man. Come back soon. I appreciate it. You know what's weird?
Oop.
The whole
Hang on one second.
CIA Ukraine story.
You stop that. Okay. All right. So he talked about the color revolution in 2014 to overthrow the Ukrainian government. Basically, it was a State Department operation. He talked about the role of the energy in this whole thing, Russian energy, Ukrainian energy, and also with that, keep in mind. Let me add this. So there's Victoria Nuland again, right? This is actually her husband who coined the term or who called this three-pronged CIA, Pentagon, State Department operation as the blob, right? Mike here says it's not my term. You're not stealing it. This is the term the blob lovingly uses to describe itself, right? This is Robert Kagan, who is actually Victoria Nuland's husband, right? Saying here, respect the blob, learn from the blob, love the blob, right? So anyway, so that's why Mike says that whenever you see the CIA or hear about the CIA being involved in something, you know that the State Department and the Pentagon is involved, even though and the same, kind of vice versa with all three of them. So what I was getting at with the energy is this is the Nord Stream pipeline that was sabotaged. This is the Russian natural gas pipeline that goes from Russia to Germany. They were supplying Germany with natural gas, right? And this is when it was blown up, right? And there was all this, when was it? I think it was not long after Russia went into Ukraine, right? And that war started. But this, and the United, this was a pipeline that went from Russia to Germany, right? The United States claimed that, they had nothing to do with it. They don't know, they tried to blame it on Russia, as if Russia would blow up their own pipeline that was providing them, all this money to provide Germany natural gas, right? So anyway, I just emphasizes the importance of the energy sector in all this, and also that will tie in with Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, the Ukraine energy company. Also, Mike mentioned that he believes that there's going to be all kinds of funding to keep NATO and to keep United States and to keep this war against Russia going. Right, this came out 2 days ago. Or NATO proposes $100 billion 5-year fund to aid Ukraine. So this is, they're going all in on this situation in Ukraine. What does this talk about? This talks about them basically turning over weapons decisions and weapons to NATO, so that the control will be in their hands. No matter who gets elected as president, they're going to keep this war going in Ukraine, right? Even if Trump gets elected and wants to get America out of it, right? They're trying to set things up where this is going to they're going to be able to continue this operation regardless of who gets elected. And this is just real quick here. This is the head of NATO here saying that Ukraine will join NATO, right? And this is Secretary Blinken from the State Department, U.S. State Department, saying the same thing. Blinken says that Ukraine will be joining NATO, right? And whoever, this Will Tanner here, mentions this is insane, and this is insane, right? This is literally going to start, will escalate, certainly escalate the war and get us into World War III. This is completely insane. These people talking about getting Ukraine into NATO. All right, I'm going to jump to this other video here real quick. This is Mike again, Mike Benz. Like I said, follow him directly on Twitter. His links in the description. Follow him directly. He's just got a tremendous amount of information, and I'm trying to show you things that kind of like all kind of correlate to what I'm trying to present tonight. All right, so this says Hunter Biden was advancing a CIA project in Ukraine to swing the natural gas market towards NATO, and that's why he's untouchable. He is untouchable. That's why the Department of Justice will not go after him, right? So let's hear from Mike again.
I just wanted to break this down in video to make it perfectly plain and clear to people what's happening with Hunter Biden and the CIA. Why was I saying a year and a half ago that the reason Hunter Biden is untouchable by the Justice Department is because he was part of a CIA operation, multiple ones actually. You have to understand like what's going on here. Okay, so let me just give you like a dozen data points on Hunter Biden CIA. So the first thing is Hunter was on the chairman's advisory board of the National Democratic Institute, the NDI. Okay, the NDI is the DNC wing of the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the top CIA cutout used in our tens of thousands of NGO swarms. NED ranks number one. It was created to be a NGO affiliate of the CIA. It was created to do overtly what the CIA was doing covertly and getting in trouble for doing in the 20th century, created under the Reagan administration in 1983. And there's something called the NDI for Democrats and the IRI for Republicans, the CIA wing of the Republican Party. And they both split spoils, basically on U.S. foreign policy jobs that the CIA orchestrates. You don't get to be part of the chairman's advisory committee of the NDI unless you are CIA linked or CIA vetted. It is a CIA. It's a Gongo, except it's a Congo, if you will. NGOs, government organized, non-governmental organizations. This is a CIA organized non-Conco, a CIA organized non-CIA organization. Okay, it's the CIA. Okay, and he's on the chairman's advisory board of that. And oh, by the way, when he was at Burisma, who was the other person on the Burisma board from the U.S. there was Cofer Black, who had spent 30 years in the CIA. Cofer Black was Mitt Romney's Sherpa to the intelligence community during his presidential run in 2012. And you know what? Mitt Romney's on the board of the IRI, who I just mentioned, the International Republican Institute, the CIA cutout counterpart to the NDI. Okay, Burisma was a CIA operation. Okay, let me say this again. Burisma was a CIA operation. Okay, so was Naftagaz. That's the public and then respectively the private and public natural gas companies there. There were a couple other private ones in addition to Burisma. But the CIA was trying to break down Gazprom and swing the gas market from Russia to NATO. Okay, they've been trying to do this for 16 friggin' years. It's been an in-process CIA, State Department, Pentagon project for 16 friggin' years. Okay, they were trying to capacity build Burisma and shift its board to make it U.S. controlled. They're doing the same thing simultaneously with Naftagaz, the feeder that Burisma feeds into. You can even read about the power struggle between George Soros and Vladimir Putin for control over Naftagaz, the state-owned titan that has been the privatization prize of the IMF. That was part of the reason that we overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, is to privatize those assets because we knew that we were going to be cutting Russia off. So the Western stakeholders wanted to profit from this $1 trillion windfall if Russia could be kicked out of the European energy market. This is common activity for the Central Intelligence Agency, which was created by corporate lawyers in 1947 as its first class, okay? The corporate espionage side of the CIA operation here has geopolitical dimensions. If you kill Russia's energy exports, you kill their military, which means you kill their ability to run air defense systems to Syria. You kill their ability to run small arms to sub-Saharan Africa to oppose, U.S. control over lithium and cobalt and copper and aluminum and gold and oil and gas there too. This was a long-range CIA project where Hunter Biden happened to be ass deep in exactly the number one geopolitical target of what the CIA was doing under the Obama administration, which is trying to kill Russia's energy exports. So meanwhile, you had this endogenous Ukrainian gas company that Hunter's on the board of. And by the way, who's Hunter's dad at the time? It's Joe Biden, the vice president in charge of the Ukraine portfolio. But Joe Biden spent 30 years on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, 10 years rotating between chairman and ranking member. That is the coordinating wing of the Senate with the State Department and the CIA, okay? Specifically Central and Eastern Europe. Joe Biden was hugely involved in the Yugoslavia operation in the late 1990s and breaking that up, which again was a CIA job, okay? That's why you have to understand the structure of the blob. Whenever you see the State Department, the CIA is there and the Pentagon are there, and you just don't see it yet. Whenever you see the CIA, the State Department, and the Pentagon there, you just don't see it yet. Okay? It was like, and even British intelligence is all over this LNG story. And you don't get British intelligence without U.S. intelligence. The fact is they need the CIA will lean on the Justice Department. I just did 6 hours of subscriber streams about the relationship between CIA and DOJ, and that the CIA will lean on DOJ to kill investigations into criminal activity involving assets of the CIA, so that they can continue to do work that's in the U.S. national interest, even if it's a criminal enterprise, because the CIA has a license to do that. They have the license to crime under NSC 10-2. The license to do criminal activity, as long as it's plausibly deniable. And Hunter Biden was a part of a plausibly deniable CIA operation to swing the gas market towards NATO. Okay, that's why it's untouchable.
Okay. All right. So, continuing on, right? So just to review, we're talking about a blob color revolution, right? CIA, Pentagon, State Department color revolution in Ukraine in 2014. We're talking about the involvement of the energy, right? LNG, liquid natural gas, the natural gas companies and resources. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you another clip from Mike talking about how unions are a key feature to color revolutions. Let me bring this next one up real quick. All right, give me a second here. We'll bring this back up. So now, like I said, we're going to bring in how unions are get involved and what their role is in the color revolutions, right? So this is Randy Weingarten. She's the president of the of one of the largest, if not the largest. I'm not sure if that's larger than the NEA, the National Education Association. I think the AFT is larger than the NEA. Anyway, they're basically both both captured and both, you know, in the same mindset. but she's the president of the American Federation of Teachers. She was over in Ukraine, and Mike's going to explain, kind of like, this is more of a theory he talks about of what her involvement is over there, and I want you to understand about how this can relate to a potential color revolution, or certainly protests and what Mike calls kind of rent-a-riots in the United States. Like I said, leading up to the election and potentially after the election, depending on how things go, right? So, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit on this video. Like I said, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump ahead, kind of get to some of the points here. In the first part of this video, Mike talks about how when a color revolution happens, that basically the United States, one of the first things they do is they take over the education system of whatever country that is, so that they can start to obviously indoctrinate the youth into a whole new mindset, right? And so he was saying that this is one of the reasons why Randy Weingarten was in Ukraine, in terms of kind of like making sure things stay on track with that. The also what he's going to get into in this part of the video that I'm going to show is how the unions play into their manpower, their boots on the ground during these protests and these rent-a-riots, and the roles that they potentially can play in color revolutions. All right, so it's taking a minute to load here. Let me refresh this and see if I can get this loaded.
Now on to the
Okay, let's try this.
good. Yes. So my NPC, yeah.
All right, here we go.
NPC maybe here. Sorry. So all right. Unions. Now I've said this before, but the AFL-CIO used to be known as the AFL-CIA by critical Noam Chomsky adjacent folks in the 1960s and 70s, because unions are the means through which we get primarily we get street muscle, which is the necessary special sauce to the end stage of a color revolution. If you look at, and I'll post this down below in a second here, but if you look at this documentary that I posted a while ago called "Bringing Down Addiction,"
and by the way, this is if you can see, this is audio only, in case you weren't sure, and maybe you thought I might have been on the wrong page, which sometimes happens. This is audio only. So there's just going to be this still image on the screen as he's talking.
A dictator, and it's about the Serbian Otpor revolution. Down below in a second here, but if you look at this documentary that I posted a while ago called "Bringing Down a Dictator."
So he just mentioned a documentary called "Bringing Down a Dictator." As soon as we're done with this video, we're going to watch the last 15 minutes of that video to wrap up tonight's broadcast. So that's the plan for the rest of this evening. And like I said, the link to that video is in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. But we're just going to watch the last 15 minutes of it to wrap things up tonight and to tie things together as soon as we're done with this description here from Mike.
And it's about the Serbian Otpor revolution, orchestrated by the State Department. Let me actually just put this in the thread below here. 1 sec. Subs, and then reply. 1 sec here. Okay, here, and gonna post this right here. Boom. All right. So you don't need to watch the whole movie, but if you're interested, the last 15 minutes of this movie are extremely illustrative. In it, the last 15 minutes of this movie actually show what an end stage of a color revolution looks like. That is where you have hundreds of thousands of people on the street, mobbing a parliament building, blocking the roads, shutting down the federal buildings, basically taking, what the end stage of a takeover looks like. And that process requires bodies, and bodies effectively require unions. And here's why. So union labor, these are often sort of folks that are either, I don't want to say low skilled, but they're folks who are, when you're in foreign countries, these are people who have little to lose, who are sort of rough and tumble types, where a little bit of money goes a long way. If the State Department or USAID or the National Endowment for Democracy kicks money to the union, and the union pays those people to take to the streets, then you have a rent-a-riot. And depending on the size of that union, that rent-a-riot can be huge, to the point of tens of thousands of people. It can now, and the nice thing about unions is you can tap into all of the different trade sectors in that country. They're oftentimes the media folks are unionized, so you can get media walkouts by going straight to the union. The trade workers, the plumbers, the electricians, the railway workers, the the hospital workers. You can get all of these different tentacles of a society through which governance normally works. And you can get them all to shut down their particular domain in the country, and not only shut it down, but to take to the streets in an open air protest, which is what the end stage of kicking out the current government is, when there's all these people on the streets, and they're essentially declaring the government illegitimate and putting their own person up, who's obviously a State Department pick. But what I'm getting at here is getting back to the Randy Weingartner situation. Is you have this situation where their control over Ukraine's education system was already fragile coming into this, because the Ukrainians were going along with this, but they were very resentful at the Americans for forcing the LGBT stuff down their throats. And then you have the fact that I am sure that every single large, union type organization in Ukraine has a State Department liaison. And I see her presence there as being shoring up those relationships, providing a sort of, symbolic thing where, oh, it's not taxation without representation. I'm coming over here, I'm making the time. We're not just like some far off empire you have to, pay your Danageld to, your ransom payments. So I think there's a symbolic thing, and I think she's also having the personal meetings with all the different people in the proto Ministry of Education that Ukraine has, to make sure they remain under the thumb of NATO and don't go trying to start their own education system or trying to win back control over their own education. And then finally, I suspect she's meeting with the union type leaders in Ukraine. And if you want to see a great example of everything that I'm talking about, look at the Lech Walesa Poland solidarity example. A lot of people think that communism ended in Europe during the Cold War because of capitalism. And I'm not anti-capitalist, believe me, I'm not. I'm very much on I'm not a socialist person. The plain fact is Poland didn't win its independence necessarily on the strength of ideals or the idealistic, just inevitable victory of freedom and the free flow of capital. It won it because Lech Walesa, the rebel leader, seeking to throw off the yoke of communism from Poland, ran a several 100,000 person strong union, and he received something like $50 million from the Central Intelligence Agency to juice that union muscle with CIA money, so that all of these Polish union workers would be emboldened to carry out a color revolution against the Soviets.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there, and we'll roll into the last 15 minutes of bringing down a dictator, right? So the important point to remember here is the role of unions in a color revolution, and also understand that the teachers' unions are fully on board with the Democratic Party, right? Fully on board, fully supportive, 100% on board, right? So and also keep in mind, like during the BLM protests, there was a lot of teacher union involvement in that. There's stuff going on in Canada. There's major teacher union involvement going on in those protests up there. They're fully on board with with the Democratic Party and what what they want to do. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so let me play this last video. Like I said, this is going to be the last 15 minutes of this video. You can watch the whole thing if you want from the link in the description. This is the color revolution in Serbia. I believe 1999, 2000-ish. And this is, the whole first part of the movie kind of shows how the CIA is funding these opposition groups, and then ultimately how this all plays out to overthrow the government, and we'll watch that part here.
Vi ćete imati najveći zadatak u životu. Ako stvari stoje onako kako ja mislim da stoje, mi ćemo morati organizujemo proteste. Vi ste trenirani da to sprovedete. Vi ste pravili mrežu po fakultetima. Ovo je vaš protest. Sve što se bude dešavalo je vaše.
They've trained and organized for months.
So just another thing too is you keep in mind, their symbol, kind of blurred out a little bit, is the raised fist, right? Very similar to BLM. This
they face the decisive test of their nonviolent movement.
Raised fist symbol.
Can they force the regime?
There you can see it a little better here.
Das and Kostunica declare a runoff is unnecessary and call upon the people to prepare for a general strike. 3 days before the strike is to begin, coal miners at the Kolubara mine, just south of Belgrade, give Kostunica an unexpected boost. A committee representing 17,000 workers votes to strike immediately. They say they want their action to inspire the rest of the country to support the strike. The mine, which produces 70% of Serbia's electrical power, is idle. The miners have set an example. Now the rest of the country joins them in a nationwide action to bring all normal life to a standstill.
We knew that Milosevic can resist only with support from police and army. And we knew if he can affect police and army around him and bring them to think, should they support Milosevic or not, or the people, that he cannot survive. And it was very important for us to find symbols of this very wide national resistance, and to show to the police and to army that it's not just opposition against government, but that is people against Milosevic.
Keep in mind also the recent protests, the recent pro-Palestinian protests around the country, where they were blocking highways, bridges, tunnels. This like I said, the whole reason I'm doing this is to kind of like raise awareness of this as being a possibility of things that are coming, depending on how the election goes and what happens. But part of that also, could be testing certain areas, like choke points, where's the best place to shut down to cause the most disturbance. Things like that, and understand, like, these protests, this is most, these people are being funded. Certainly the organizers of these protests, they're being funded to do this, right? There might be some people who are kind of like caught up in the movement, who maybe believe in the cause and are out there kind of, volunteering and whatever. They get caught up in the movement, right? But understand, and that's part of the process. Right? They make people think that this is a grassroots protest, that this is an organic opposition, organic protests, right? Where in fact they're being funded. It's astroturfed. It's fake, right? They're being funded. They're being organized by people who are professionals, people who are getting paid to do this, and they have very specific reasons for what they're doing, right? This isn't just a group of people who are upset about something and go out and create these protests.
As police and army encircle the striking miners, ordinary people respond to an urgent call to support and protect the strikers. Thousands come, a signal to the police and army that Milosevic is finished. In larger cities, taxi drivers join in slow-moving rolling blockades. Public transport drivers park their buses and streetcars across major intersections. The police try to maintain order, but every day the strike spreads. Having lost the election and been thwarted in his attempts to steal it, Milosevic must now step down or use violence.
We had the nation trained not to attack the police, not to use the violence.
By the way, this is, you can hear Martin Sheen is narrating this, right? So you have Hollywood involved in kind of this kind of propagandized version of this color revolution, right? Obviously they're looking at it from the viewpoint of the people who are overthrowing the government, right?
Because our message was, there is no war between police and us, that we together are the victims of the system. And there is no reason to have war between victims and victims. One victims are in blue uniforms, other victims are in blue jeans, but there is no reason for that blood.
Das and its supporters are angry and persistent, but they are also patient, determined to avoid bloodshed as they slowly escalate their actions.
It was crucial that we left enough time for these people in the regime to understand what is going on. It was not just one day revolution, but it was 10 days with daily increasing this pressure, and Serbia was in blockade. But by the end, it was absolutely clear that the majority is against Milosevic.
10 days after the election, almost no one in Belgrade realizes the turning point is at hand. Since before daybreak, Serbia has been on the move, converging on the capital from every direction. The operation has been quietly planned by DOS leaders across the country. Convoy leaders have prepared for police resistance. They've even brought bulldozers to break through barricades if necessary. At 9 a.m., one convoy, led by the mayor of Čačak in his jogging suit, finds the road completely blocked by police.
Prepreka pošla na put. Nećemo ulaziti. Čekaj, je slobodna država ili nije? Nećemo ulaziti u konflikt.
Čekaj, laki, polako. Kolona je dugačka od Čačka. Pomerite kamione, nemate uopšte razloga.
Ljudi, budite i vi pribrani.
Jesmo pribrani, došli smo.
Naređenje nam je tako. Znači, ja mogu malo da vam kažem.
Znam. Juče smo...
Vi shvatite mene.
Dobro, ćemo li mi da preduzimo akciju da vi ništa se ne mešate? Vi ste vaše uradili pod naređenja, mi ćemo naš, znači nemoj samo vi da se
šansu
mešate.
da nas se priključite ljudi,
Znači,
i polomit će kamione bez veze.
Recite im da ne lome kamione, znači nema nikakve intervencije, ništa. Kad dođe starešina, sačekajte, strpite se. Vi šajte dođe večera. Svakog trenutka dolazi, dogovorite se. Jel može tako? Može. Recite ljudima.
Tired of negotiating, the men of the Čačak convoy removed the blockade themselves.
Right, and just kind of like picturing in your mind too, right? You have the people, you have the police, all these different kind of dynamics happening, right? Think of how many police officers knelt down with, during the BLM protests, right? Knelt down with the protesters, and kind of like, they were caught up. They didn't know what the hell was going on, or they just think of, human nature and how these things happen, and it very easily could turn, depending on how the narrative is presented, how people don't know who to believe, right? You can see the struggle that the police was going through, trying to figure out what to do. Do they stop these people from coming into the city? Do they prevent them from coming in? All of this is all of the work leading up to this was to help to cause this confusion and destabilization.
These people who came from cities like Čačak or Ružice, they were prepared to do anything. They were not just urban demonstrators, as the most people of Belgrade, just go to the streets and shout and then go home. No, these people came here to do something, and they will not go back home before that is finished.
Special units for anti-terrorist actions were expecting us in Belgrade. They've been cooperating with us closely. We made radio contact with them every 10 minutes. I would then give the information to my fellow citizens. We have the police. They are taking our side any minute now.
As the morning goes on, it becomes clear that the police will build barricades but not defend them. Convoys from the south enter Belgrade at about 11 in the morning. Their rendezvous point is the Federal Parliament building. Mayor Illich stays in contact with convoys still on the road. They plan to link up for a non-violent takeover of the Parliament at 3 p.m.
Notice Smart Sheen keeps saying non-violent, right? Non-violent. This is a mostly peaceful overthrow of the government, right? As long as you cooperate, we won't hurt you. It's mostly peaceful. Right? He tries to emphasize that non-violent.
Through back-channel contacts with commanders, Das has been assured the security forces will step aside. But no one takes it for granted.
We didn't know how police would react. We knew that some part of police will not react against the people, but we didn't know about all parts of police. And the police were very, very confused.
The impatient Chachak contingent advances before the other convoys arrive, but they are easily repelled. What the police don't know is that hundreds of thousands of Serbs are still on the road to Belgrade. The farmers and workers who supported Otpor and are determined to stop the theft of their votes. Hours after the first convoys arrived in the capital, the news reaches Belgrade citizens. They come into the streets chanting, "Serbia has arisen." On this day, there is only one place to be.
Nemojte gađati policiju. Policija će preći na stranu naroda. I nemojte izazivati incidente.
Das leaders, now monitoring police radio channels, listen as orders are given to remove the crowds. But nothing happens.
They didn't really mean to do anything. They simply ignored the orders and they observed what is going on. And when they realized that there is hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Belgrade, and there is more and more and more coming from all parts of Serbia, and that you have a kind of uprising in this country. Of course, they knew that any kind of using the force against these people would be a self-destruction, and they realized that it would mean that they are losers together with Milosevic. They didn't want that to happen.
A reporter wrote, "The police and army commanders never ordered their troops to fire because they knew their own kids were in that crowd." Inside the building, they find thousands of presidential ballots, pre-marked for Milosevic.
Well, breaking the few windows and parliament in flames, it's just nothing. In comparison to the former period here, to what Milosevic did here, to what other Balkan countries did here, to what United States did here with its bombs, that was like a children's game.
Two lives are lost in the takeover, to a heart attack suffered by an elderly man in the crowd and a traffic accident. Milosevic has not been seen in 2 days, but there is no doubt he's finished. The people have taken power.
What we needed the whole time was not the threat or use of force. It was the threat to his hold on power. And that was best gained through democratic forces within Serbia. And, the grand lesson here is that broad-based coalition of popular, nonviolent protest.
This is the CIA operator, or one of them who helped fund the opposition and to stir up and advise the opposition to overthrow the government, right? So of course now he's explaining how this was all just kind of like the people's movement, and it was their own type of thing. So it's kind of both kind of hilarious and also very sick that he describes it. That he talks this way about it.
Can sweep away a dictatorship much more quickly than all the covert action on earth.
I think we succeeded because we simply loved life more than them. Generally, those guys were the preachers of the death. Their hatred, their propaganda, their language smelled like that. And we won because we loved life more. We decided to love life, and you can't beat the life. So this is what Ottobar did. We were a group of fans of life, and this is why we succeeded.
Funded by the CIA, State Department, Pentagon. So, okay, I'll stop it here. They were successful in overthrowing the government there. So let me just to wrap this up, right? The points that I kind of want you to take, to leave with, is the idea of this color revolution, the idea of these as Mike describes them, these rent-a-riots, or these government funded organizations to go out and to do these protests, and also the narrative that is created by the media to get other people, unsuspecting people, kind of swept up in these movements, right? So the whole point of tonight's broadcast is to make you aware of these color revolutions and the possibility, and I think the likelihood of these protests and riots and potential color revolution type operations happening here in America over the next year or so. Like I said, surrounding the whole election process is there. It's certainly potential, and I think it's likely. And I want you to just be aware of this, so that as these things start to happen, you don't get caught up in the media narrative, and don't get caught up in just the emotion of it. that you'll have a bigger picture understanding that there's forces operating behind the scenes that are creating these things. And like I said, it's important for all of us to be aware of that. So, we'll wrap it up there for tonight. I appreciate everybody joining, and we'll see you next Thursday.